all systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 3 showdown stream for the 3M Open. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure. But first off, a look at the weather. We'll talk strategy for Saturday too. Any sort of questions or deep dives that you've got for me in the live chat, and of course some strategy on DraftKings as well. But anything on top of that you're curious about, just feel free to go ahead and pick my brain in the chat. Looks like we got Robert down there, also C. Floyd early to the proceedings. Welcome on in and let's have ourselves a weekend. First off, hopefully everyone's having a fantastic Friday and is excited for everything on moving day. So like I said, anything that you're curious about, feel free to let me know. But let's get this thing started for tomorrow. So the first thing to note is that play ended up favoring the AM side of tee times today. And I didn't expect that ahead of time. I thought it'd be a little bit flatter, maybe like a quarter stroke advantage towards the morning. But the golf course dried out as the day went on, which I guess in hindsight maybe is something that we could have foreseen. But it played to about a 0.5 stroke difference. In fact, it's actually getting a little bit larger as the day goes on. And this kind of trend with the golf course getting drier and drier after that torrential downpour that they had on Wednesday is probably going to continue into tomorrow. And when you add on top of that the potential for some winds in the afternoon, it could probably be like a 0.5 to a 0.6 stroke advantage again. So just to show you what I'm talking about here, you'll see that on the HRRR for tomorrow, they're calling for closer to 10 miles an hour of wind in the afternoon. The wind gust a little bit more flat throughout the day. So I'm not talking any sort of drastic change with these weather conditions, but it could be slightly advantageous to play on the morning side of things, just like it was for today. And if we take a look at the ceiling scores, they still came from both sides. In fact, Alex Noren played on the harder side of things and shot -9. Heck, a lot of these guys that are -6 or better were on the harder side in the PM wave. So it wasn't the end all be all. It likely won't be the end all be all for tomorrow. So with this kind of weather situation, as long as it doesn't change all that much, I'm going to have some early guys for my leverage, especially some of the lower owned players that are teeing off early. But if there's somebody going off towards the middle to latter half of things that is really checking boxes for me with the shots gained metrics, then I'm not going to shy away from that. I'm still going to have some guys that are going off in the final, let's say 5 to 10 groups, but I'm probably going to have more that are going off early. So I would say if you're trying to break a tie in terms of like a 6-7K player, going with the earlier tee time might be a good way to do so. And even if you're trying to choose between a stud or two where, one's lower own's going off early, one is a guy going off later with maybe slightly better shots gained metrics, if it is going to be a half a stroke advantage, you might want to side, even though the projection might be slightly lower on the guy with the worst form going off early. You might want to go in that direction, not only because of the conditions, but the game theory is also so much better. And by game theory, I'm talking about ownership with the rest of the field. With DFS, with Showdown in general, we're not just trying to build lineups that are highly projected, but we're trying to beat the rest of the field that we're playing against as well. And just like in round 2 Showdown, where the top 5, top 10 tends to get a lot more steam than further down the board, your players that are -10 or better are going to be significantly higher owned than the guys that just make the cut. So it's kind of a double whammy where not only are they getting the better side of it with the lower wins, but also you're not sharing them with nearly as many players. So we talked about that a little bit yesterday, but it's maybe even more so the case for round 3 because the leaderboard is more mature than it was after a single round, and we still don't have placement points. It's not like Sunday where we kind of have to change our strategy a bit to account for that aspect. Round 3 is just like round 2 Showdown, but where you start has no bearing on your fantasy points and projection. So that's to kind of set the table with the strategy. The play is still finishing up. So of course, ownership projections are still just a thought at this point, but we know heading into things that the top end of the board is going to be where a lot of that steam is coming in. The next thing we'll focus on would be actually building a player pool, which just like round 2, you want to have a process for it. And my round 3 process is almost a cookie copy and paste of what I do in round 2 because we have the same scoring and no placement points. So with the shots gained metrics, we're going to be looking for some ball striking poppers, also some short game regression candidates. And then on top of that, you want to have a process for some of your lower owned plays as well, whether that's high upside players, guys that are aggressive high birdie percentage players, or even course history guys that have played well around TPC Twin Cities. So that's more so something to deep dive on your own, right? That's why the tools like the Stone, my projection sheet are so great on my Patreon page for deep diving these kind of slates, is to have that kind of research to go through and to find those lower round plays. But what we're going to focus on here are going to be the shots gained metrics from round number 2, some of them updating live as we're on the live stream here, but also any sort of player deep dives that you've got as well. So after we go through the ball striking stats and some of the short game poppers, we're going to open it up to chat and any sort of players that you want me to go through. So first off, we're going to start with the ball striking, which if we sort it for today, number 1 was Austin Eckroat. And Austin Eckroat was able to shoot -6, and that was despite not having a hot putter. He was only gaining about 0.2 strokes on the greens today. In fact, lost strokes around the green, about 0.4 strokes in that category. So you could say that Eckroat could have even shot better than that -6. And at T30, he's not going to be getting a whole bunch of steam. Now, he will be getting slightly more attention, slightly higher ownership because he's number 1 in the field in ball striking so far. But outside of that, at T30, he's not going to be as popular as those guys starting in the top 5, top 10. So if you're looking for a guy in the bottom end of the 7K range, top end of the 6Ks, not sure where he comes in at the exact price tag. I'd have to double check on my other sheet. But either way, a very cheap play that you can really get good shots gained metrics with. You're not going to find a whole bunch of those guys in this kind of field. So in Alex Smalley, if he's able to sneak through the cut line, I know that he's kind of on the edge right now. He's somebody that to this point has been really good ball striking. A Seamus Power also hit the ball extremely well, but didn't get that much out of it with his short game. A Wyndham Clark, the same thing. So a lot of these players in the top 4 to top 5 of the shots gained ball striking stats are players that I'm giving a significant boost for tomorrow. And Eric Cole is going to miss the weekend, so it doesn't matter all that much, but I guess he hit the ball well, so we'll give him a little bit of credit before he heads on to not making the cut. But Sam Burns, he gained 3 strokes ball striking, a Webb Simpson, a Rico Hoey, a Jake Knapp, and a Lashley, all worthy of giving a little bit of extra attention to as well. And it's not just the top end, like top 10 that you want to give a boost to. It's over 1.5 to 2 strokes to the field is impressive between your off the tee and approach play. So, and the thing that's great about going a little bit further down the list is that these players aren't going to be getting nearly as much steam as the guys in the top 5, top 10, because you're not going to be unique in looking at ball striking stats. It's something that's been around in the golf handicapping space for a very long time at this point. But if you're a little sneakier about it and you scroll down to, like, let's say the top 15, top 30, then you can be getting on to players that aren't going to be getting that kind of ownership steam. So, for example, like a Matty Schmid, the Olisons, the Kevin Hughes, Norlanders of the world, these mid-tier guys like David Skins. Even if we go further down the list, I'm okay with doing that too. Like an Adam Scott, Zach Johnson, Seabez, all worthy of giving a slight bump in your projections. So that's how the ball striking stats matter. And of course, just to give you guys the Spark Notes version on why that's important, how you're hitting the ball both off the tee and with your irons is the most consistent part of golf from round to round. That's your golf swing, that's your ball striking, that's what you can kind of control as a player the most. Around the green and putting with all the imperfections in golf is a lot of times something that you can't control as a player. So on the flip side, when we look at the short game categories, it can be a bit of a red flag if you gain too many strokes over here. So for example, in Alex Noren, that gains nearly 6 strokes short game, I have a hard time thinking that that's going to happen again. So with the inflated ownership of starting at T8 and also having that -9 today, he's not somebody that is very likely to make himself into my lineups. But just to give you guys a case example, and I promised you guys a couple examples after the first round. First round, Adam Svensson gained 6.5 strokes short game. Today, he's on track. Actually, he just finished up his round. He lost over 3 strokes in the short game category. So it's crazy how quick it can happen. In the case of Adam Svensson, who was your first round leader, it was a 10-stroke turnaround from round to round, literally +6 to -3.5. It's not always that extreme with these players that you find, but it oftentimes can be that extreme from players from day to day. So these guys that gained a whole bunch into the dark green, not just with the putter, but also with the around the green stats, you have to hold it against them a bit. And, 4 strokes putting for Joel Damon isn't something that is sustainable for him. He's not a very consistent putter. A Peter Malnati, a Sam Stevens, an Adam Hadman for that matter, all players that I would expect to come back down to earth a bit. And I would say the one outlier so far would be a Sam Stevens. If we take a look at his first 2 rounds, Today, he gained 3 strokes putting round 1. He also gained 5 strokes short game. Now, he was a little bit more around the green dependent. He chipped in twice in round number 1, but even gaining 2 strokes putting and then 3 the next day is not something that happens very often. In fact, so much so that I felt like we should point it out after the round 2 stats. So, it's not just the round 2 stats that you want to incorporate. You want to have the round 1 stats in the back of your mind. In fact, you can cross-reference them on a lot of these players as you're going through your research for round number 3. It's maybe not as important as the round 2 stats, but in conjunction with any sort of trend that you can find from today, it can be extremely powerful to do that further deep dive. If we go to the around the green stats, chipping in a couple times is also a lot of times just down to luck of the draw. So players like a Doug Gim, Taylor Montgomery, that gained a whole bunch around the green. I'm not sure if I would really count on that happening in back-to-back days. And let's talk through the Montgomery, because I didn't even realize he lost putting again. This is another stat profile that just utterly shocks me. He lost strokes putting in round 1 and then lost strokes putting today. He actually ended up gaining by the end of round 1. So he was one of the guys that was finishing up his round. I guess he made a few long putts towards the end. But either way, him even only gaining 1.3 strokes putting is not that crazy. And then losing the 1.3 strokes today, that's the kind of player that I would look to on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? I would not expect him to putt that poorly every single day. So these short game stats, a lot more volatile than the ball striking stats. And it's where you can look for guys to come back down to earth a little bit. And for example, if we would take a look at the guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes putting, as long as their ball striking stats were half decent, they could be a look for a bounce back as well. So, for example, a Ben Coles who gained ball striking and lost almost 4 strokes putting, he's made that a little bit of a habit lately. He has not been the best putter over his last few months. But a Ben Coles, you'd have to think, is not going to lose 3 strokes, 4 strokes putting every single round. A lot of these guys are going to miss the cut. So, we don't have to focus on them. But a David Skins at T42 who gained over 2 strokes in the ball striking categories, but lost 3 strokes putting, like that would be a bounce back candidate. Even in Adam Svensson, I know we talked about his struggles on and around the green. He gained 2.3 strokes approach. So maybe he's even a look for that kind of short game regression. This is how you use the shots gained metrics to your advantage. And shouldn't be your whole process, right? One round of data isn't always just going to be like the Rosetta Stone or the crystal ball heading into the next day, but it is one data point that you can find extremely useful. But on top of that, we've got things like the round 3 historical on the SHIPIT Nation Stone. You can take a look at guys that really putt well on the bent grass surface. Take a look at the high upside, the course history players, as I was mentioning before. You add those sort of things on top of looking at these shots gained metrics, and that's where you can really find the sweet spot. So feel free to go ahead, look through the shots gained metrics when the round ends. There's still a few players that'll be finishing up play over the next half an hour or so, but that deep dive should give you a good starting point for all of your research. So let me know if there's any players you guys want me to deep dive in the live chat. I'll see if there's anyone that you guys are already curious about. And then afterwards, we're going to wrap it up with some strategy on DraftKings. So let's see where we left off. We got Steven Deacon in the chat as well. Welcome on in. We got Ross. He said Wyndham Clark has joined the field for the Wyndham Championship. That's crazy. We got double Wyndham going on there, Wyndham squared. I guess it's because of where he's at in the FedEx Cup. So it does some crazy stuff to these guys and their schedules. What's going on? Goku Lex, what's going on? Kep as well. Glad to have you in the live chat. It's always nice to have you among us. Number 1 ball striker, Austin Eckroat, just what everyone was thinking. He stripes it, but yeah, the form isn't the best. I get what you're saying there. You said you're here to learn because you have no idea how to pick players. Well, that's what that's what we're talking about right now. So if you need any help with your process, it doesn't even have to be players that you're curious about. It can be process-based. It can be what to look for. Just let me know, right? That's what we're here for. We're all here to become better players, better showdown players, and we're here to help you out. So just let us know, man. Can I deep dive some Ricky Castillo? I for sure can. So I haven't done so myself, so I'm very curious to see what we've got here. And he lost ball striking. That's not great. But he did lose 2.3 strokes putting. So the fact that he's even on track to potentially make the cuts, he is teetering on that point right now. So he's still got to make it to the weekend for him to be a play for tomorrow. But if he does, this stat profile is not ideal with the ball striking that we've seen so far, but it's also not a death sentence either. Like he could turn it around by the end of the day. In fact, if he shows us a little bit of momentum with the off the tee and approach play over his last 4 to 5 holes, then maybe he is a really good spot to use in the morning when conditions should be a little bit calmer. more receptive as well, right? The golf course is going to continue to dry out as the day goes on. He's going to be sub 3 to 4% ownership in those large field GPPs. And while we don't have the ownership published quite yet, again, make sure to check out the SHIPIT Nation site later or my Patreon page for all those projections when they are live. But even as of right now, before the round ends, assuming he makes the cut, sub 4, sub 3% ownership, which you're not going to find on everyone. So if you're looking for a GPP flyer, he fits that description quite well. He said Gim losing 3.5 strokes putting is something that tends to carry over. Yeah, so he's kind of like the opposite of Montgomery, right? He'll lose strokes in back-to-back days because he's atrocious at putting. Whereas you've got guys like Denny McCarthy, for example, that'll gain 2.5 strokes, 3 strokes putting every day, and we don't bat an eye on it. So it's important to have that context with the players that you're looking at. Like, for example, if Tony Finau gains like 5 strokes putting one day, right, you're not expecting that to happen the next day. But if somebody like Sam Burns that gains 5 strokes putting one day, or Nick Dunlap, then watch out, because there's a pretty good chance that that's going to continue. But let's move on to some contest-based strategy. So if you guys have any deep dives, I will get back to those towards the very end of the live stream. But we're going to focus on the DraftKings side now. And the contests are a little bit better than round number 2. Like the sand trap, I believe, is 25K bigger than round 2. So still super top heavy. In fact, now it's even more top heavy than round number 2. DraftKings hit us with the DK special. They made it a slightly bigger contest, but rather than keeping it a 25K prize pool to first place, they bumped it up twice to 50K. And now the payout structure is pretty crappy. So I would stick away from this one if you can. It's a third of the whole payout to first place, and then it drops down 5x for second place. So even if you have a nearly nutted lineup, you have 0.1, 0.2 points off of first place, you could end up with 10,000, which I know doesn't seem like a bad thing. But if you're 150 maxing this for like 3-4 grand, or close to 150 maxing it, that's not even that great for finishing in second place. So I'm going to be staying very clear of that contest. Let's look at the long drive. So that's the big $100 single entry. It's a fifth to first place. So it's not the best payout structure, but it's also not the worst that I've ever seen either. So I'll probably have an entry in there, as I typically do. The drive to green is by far the best GPP. So unlike the big $25 where they made it bigger and then they screwed up the first place payout, they made this one bigger and then they kept the payout the same. So this is what we want DraftKings. And if we want DraftKings to post more of these contests, then we've got to max enter and we've got to show them that there's demand for these sort of contests. And the reason why this one is so much better, and I'd recommend people to enter this one 10x over that sand trap, is because it's only a seventh to first place. When it's only 1/7 that is towards the victor, that means that second, third place actually means something. And when you're 150 maxing it's for like $750. You win second place, that's still like 4 or 5x your total entries. Whereas in the other contests, it's a little bit over like 2.5x that you're winning for second place. Like, for goodness sakes, if you finish in runner-up, at least get something for that kind of performance. So that's a tangible kind of example of that in action. But that's why we want to look for those flatter payout structures, which you're predominantly going to find in single entries. So like that long drive is an example of a flatter payout structure. But if you go to like the $33 dog leg or this $12 albatross, these are also extremely flat payout structures. In fact, this one's 12% to first. Let's go to the $12 next. That one should also be about 12, even 10% to first place. You want contests just like this if you're going to be a long-term sustainable player. So check that out. Make sure to check out the more sustainable contests, and it's going to have a long-term benefit on your overall results. And then for putting together lineups, it's just like round 2, where we want to make sure we have enough leverage in our lineup for the kind of contests that we're entering. The smaller the contest, the less that we're worried about the ownership. But in the big $5 sand trap, $5 or the big sand trap for $25, that's where ownership really starts to matter. And, when you're playing against 10,000 to 20,000 other entries, not only do you want to try to avoid duplicating yourself, but you also want to make sure that you're not holding hands on all 6 of your players at like 25% ownership. So towards the top, I'm not going to be afraid of getting a little bit different towards the rest of the field, but you don't have to get different with your players up top. I would say up top, it's a little bit more optional on whether you want to start to get some ownership into your lineups, a little bit lower owned players, I should say. But you don't have to, because you're still going to have spots in the 6-7K range to get that differentiation. So up top, we're going to start with I don't know. I'm stuck between a few players, but let's go Sam Burns at T31. I like the ball striking stats. I like the fact that he shot a low score today without really gaining a whole bunch putting. And we know he's a good putter, so I would expect him to have a spike putting around at some point this weekend. When he does so, I want to be there because it could be one of the low rounds of the day. So let's go with him. Our next man in, there's not really that many low-owned players in this 8-9K range. I suppose some of the lower-owned guys would be like your -6s, like I guess a Kurt Kitayama, maybe a Ricky Fowler at -7. But like I was saying before, you don't have to get different with every single player that you're using. So I'm going to throw in a Grillo who just hit a prop bet for me. So I'm pretty hyped about Grillo right now. Good vibes with him. He cashed me out for like I think it was a $750 bet. So like I said, I have no problems using him again for tomorrow, but he's a good course history guy. That's the reason why I bet him for the prop that he did today. His course history is better than just about anyone in the field. And though we have a little bit of a weather edge, and I like the idea of going after some earlier starters, it's not a big enough edge where it's going to take me off of guys like a Grillo or Sam Burns. Burns has decent form. He's towards the middle end of tee times. Grillo with this course history, and especially because there's not a lot of guys towards the top that we're going to be able to play that kind of weather edge with, I'm still okay mixing those into a few different spots. Our next man in, though, and because we're in the big large field GBP, this is like for the big $5 for tomorrow, we've got to start to think about that ownership at some point. So a Cam Champ who's going to make the cut seemingly on the number, he's another guy with elite tier course history. And not only that, but he gives us a little bit of a weather edge if that ends up becoming a thing. Matt McCarty, also, he's sitting right on that cut line, would be getting a weather edge, and he's a high birdie percentage guy. So maybe not a course history player. This is, I believe, his first or second time teeing it up here, but he does fit that high upside profile that I'm looking for. We're still looking for lower owned players, which we're getting with the Champ McCarty. I have both of them at sub 10%. We could even throw in a Skins. I mentioned Tim as a short game regression candidate before. At T44, he's also got that earlier tee time. So I think the weather edge is best used for these 6, 7K guys, especially because it's where you're getting a lot of your leverage as well. Your last man in here, even if it is like a Homa who, you know, he'll get some ownership because of how he started this week, but he had a little bit of a disappointing finish, which might keep some people off of him. But what you've got to realize about Homa is that he had the last 6 holes, he had like 10 putts he had like 5 putts of less than 10 feet. Got that backwards when I was saying it, but he had a ton of really short looks for birdie on his last 5 or 6 holes, and he made none of them. I mean, even on the last hole, he put it in the water, made the round look a whole lot worse than it was in reality. Max Homa is the kind of guy that I could really see turning on the Jets for moving day. So, you know, if you wanted to round off a lineup with him at $8,100, you can get away with that because we were intentional about getting different with the McCarty, the Champ, even the Skins play. You're looking at sub 10% ownership. So if you want to splurge with your last man in here at 10 to 15%, like you're going to get on Max Homa, you might even be a little bit over 15%. I'll have to see where my projections have him here in like a half an hour to an hour. But even if you did that, even if he is getting more steam than what I think right now, that's okay because of what we've done before. So that shows you the power of getting to that leather edge, because not only could it lead to slightly easier conditions, but it lets us use chalk in a few other spots. Like, for example, with the Burns, the Grillo towards the top end of the board, or even an 8K guy that just grades out well for round number 3. So that's the lineup construction. You really have to cater it to the contest that you're entering. If you were in a single entry, you can focus on the ownership a little bit less. But I do have to say, when we have a weather edge like this and one that's favoring the lower owned side of things, I like the GPPs a bit more. And especially like when we have that $5 that is a 7th to first place, that's where I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I'm going to be going 150 max in that contest, really attacking that weather edge where I can for at least 2 or 3 players in every single lineup, if not even 3 or 4 in some of those large field GBPs. So that kind of ties it all together, right? We talked about some weather when going through the lineup construction, but also the things that I'm looking for in my player pool as well. So hopefully it gives you guys a good sense of how to attack your exposure for Saturday. I hope to see a lot of your names and logos towards the top end of those GBPs. For all the projections on round 3, you guys can find mine on my Patreon page. Of course, you can find the link to that on my X/Twitter bio. That is GSLukeDFS. On there, the Golf DFS tier, I charge $15 a month for all my DFS projections, is where you can find my entire player pool, my projections for everyone in round number 3, as well as access me for any sort of the coaching and tips that I do outside of these live streams. So make sure to check out my Patreon for that. Again, link to that is on my Twitter/X bio, GSLukeDFS, but also the SHIPIT Nation website going to have projections up later tonight with all the content for moving day as per usual. The Stone, by the way, the absolute nuts for going through research, in my opinion. They've got the round 3 historical, which is going to be great to go through. Also, the putting series, the approach series, which so many people swear by in the community. Make sure to check out all of that a little bit later on this evening for your round 3 process as well. But that's all, guys. I appreciate your support here on the channel as per usual. Also going to have a prop and betting live stream a little bit later on tonight. That is going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern time on my YouTube channel. That is GSLukeDFS on YouTube, going over all the underdog and price pick stuff for round number 3, as well as all the matchups on the sports books. And today ended up being a really good one for yours truly. Had 4 slips that I entered and I cashed out on 3 of them. And they're not straight bets, right? They're parlays. They're 2 3-leg parlays that I enter in most cases. So when you hit on 3 of your 4 bets for well into the, plus 200, plus 300 range, ends up being a good ROI day. So feeling pretty good about that. Already mentioned Griot cashing me out for a little bit under a band. Overall, it was about 3-4 bands, 3.5 bands to be exact, that we added to the bankroll this week. It has me smiling on a Friday a little bit, right? It's always nice when you add to the bankroll. So if you guys want to jump on the prop and betting train, make sure to join me for that content a little bit later on this evening. But that's all I've got. I'll see if there's any last second player deep dives that you've got for me. But if not, I'll catch you guys for the round 4 content. So yeah, we can go through Jake Knapp and Olesen. You said, what are their trajectories looking like heading into the weekend? So Knapp, I know his trajectory is fantastic. I know he's had 2 of the lowest rounds of the event so far, but in round 2 in particular, it was ball striking heavy. So at 8.5, 9 out of 10 stat profile, man. So Knapp, if you have like an outright bet or you have main slate exposure that's heavy there, I would feel great about that. And then the other one is Thorbjorn Olesen. I'm assuming you mean, right? So Thorbjorn, maybe not as rock solid off the tee. He did lose off the tee today. Round 1 was a gainer across the board. But even this is a 7.5, 7 out of 10 stat profile, right? Like we could nitpick it. We could say like, oh, he lost those 2 strokes off the tee. Everything else is fantastic though. So yeah, 7.5, maybe even an 8 out of 10 there. But man, Jake Knapp looks like just a magician at this point. And Michael says amazing Gotterup remains competitive. Yeah, man. I mean, it's 5 weeks in a row Gotterup's playing. He's been in contention for, I guess, 4 of those 5 weeks now at this point. Tip of the cap to him. If I had my hat on the right way, I would fully take it off and give him the tip of the cap. But I think he's proving to a lot of us that he's legit and that he's going to be around for quite some time. So yeah, don't be surprised if he keeps it up over the next few days. I know I sure won't be for that, but that's all I've got. Appreciate you guys stopping by as usual. And I'll see you guys for the round 4 live stream tomorrow.